Oh boy, look at who we're talking about today. The one and only Roronoa Zoro. This is the man among men, the cream of the crop, the guy that puts the Z in Zex and the butt sex in subtext.
This brave Adonis, this Cadillac of men.
When the Greek gods washed the ocean's foam amongst the shore, it was not Aphrodite that sprouted from that clam, but Zoro himself. The want, the envy, the pure carnal desire such a man inflicts upon this world, it is like nothing I've ever seen. Men want to be him, and men also want him, I guess? Can't say I blame them, what with those huge honkers walking around. You can believe me when I say the eye candy of One Piece is not Nami or Robin, but Roronoa Zoro himself. Certified biggest tits on the crew, let's go, King! When it comes to Zoro, I have honestly never seen such a reaction amongst, I'll say mostly male fans. There is an extreme lust for bust here, whether it's due to his heavy-handed masculinity or other heavy-handed things. I do not know. I mean, I say I don't know, but if you see the reactions upon his fights and anything he says or does, you get the picture pretty quick. I have never seen a character cater to both the male fantasy and the male gaze at the same time. There's a reason the Rule 34 Zoro tag is absolutely buck wild. It is no stretch to say that Zoro is probably the most popular character in One Piece, with Luffy being his biggest contender. I haven't done a proper deep dive, but I wouldn't be surprised if these two had the same amount of merchandise to their names. And in saying that, Zoro absolutely has the most unofficial NSFW figures out of any One Piece man. These figures are the funniest things ever, by the way. If YouTube let me show dick and balls, I'd give you the full picture, but for now, you can use your imagination for what these look like. Lust for bust aside, what I'm saying here is Zoro is insanely popular, and there's no surprise as to why. There's parts of his character that are for everyone. If you like the cool macho man, congratulations, you'll like Zoro. If you like the dumb himbo jock, congratulations, you'll like Zoro. If you like gay people, congratulations, you'll like One Piece. And also Zoro. Hey, remember the time Zoro made a man come in film gold? I've admitted in a previous video that I had no idea about Zoro's actual character until really watching One Piece. I thought he was just a stoic, emotionless muscle man a lot of shonen animes have. And I'm not saying that character archetype is bad, but that it's just not really for me. So imagine my joy in discovering Zoro is both not only full of emotion, but a complete idiot to boot. Also, his name is so fucking annoying to say, I can't get the R right because I'm a goddamn Aussie. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here, but just know I am trying really hard not to bully him. I'd also like to say I think Zoro fans are some of the funniest fans in One Piece. The lengths a lot of them go to hype this man up is honestly kind of sweet. I don't think I've ever seen a truer and more aggressive form of love, and I'm here to tell you all that I am sure Zoro would give you a big old kiss on the lips. And I do really like Zoro myself. He's probably in my top 3, maybe 4, since I find it really hard to rank One Piece characters in terms of who I like the most. So take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. I promise I have Zoro's best intentions at heart. Anyway, bullying this goofy man aside, there is actually something I'm here to discuss today. When it comes to Zoro, I do believe there are some pretty big misconceptions about his character. These are in terms of his personality, his role in the series, and his general views overall. And I'm not here to argue about his physical strength, he's proved that time and time again. This is not a power scaling video. If you want to watch a video talking about how he mid-diffs, high-diffs, flips, fucks, and tops Sanji, I don't think this is the content you're looking for. But at the same time, if you want to stick around and gain new insight, I can keep you company. There's a lot of arguing about Zoro online, or I guess I should call them heated discussions. Many people say he's a very two-dimensional character, that he doesn't have a lot going on for him apart from swords and booze. Others will defend him to high hell, saying he's actually very deep and you just don't know him like I do. And I'm here to say that both of those things, are wrong. Just because Zoro doesn't have the deepest backstory ever, especially in regards to other characters we've seen, it doesn't make him two-dimensional. At the same time, he's not extremely complex, and in my humble opinion, he really doesn't have to be. Just like Luffy, Zoro's dreams are simple yet hard to reach. His ambitions are clear, his motivations are solidly set, as they always have been, and he's definitely got more to him than his huge rack. This man is more than just his tits, god damn it. In all honesty, I actually think it's an insult to his writing to say Zoro's two-dimensional. I need people to understand that being two-dimensional and being simple are not mutually exclusive. Everything about Zoro is simple, from his outlook on life to his goals to his words and actions. He's a simple guy, and he's allowed to be one. At the same time, there are also those who like Zoro but look at nothing but his strength within the series. Big muscles and big swords does not a good character make. You get good fight scenes, there's no debating that, but he may as well be any randy, wildly flailing swords around if that's all there was to him. Actually, his strength is one of the things that makes him so interesting and appealing as a character, but not in the way of fights alone. To dig into what I'm trying to say here, we need to do a good old character analysis. So, what makes Zoro tick? Swords, fights, and booze on the surface. But in the depths of his heart, it's his ambitions, his promise, and his fear. You heard that right. Zoro fears things. Absolutely crazy. But hear me out, I'm not done yet. In regards to Zoro's ambitions and his promise, those two things tie into each other. His ambition is fueled because of his promise to both Kuina and Luffy. He put his word on Wado to become a master swordsman, wanting to achieve Kuina's dream while also helping Luffy strive for his own. It's also important to note he's pushing each member of the Straw Hats to achieve their own dreams with his promise of protection and reliability. We especially see this when Sanji is extremely moved by Zoro's fight with Mihawk at the Baratier. But I can save that one for a Sanji video, so I'll put that aside for now. So we know about his ambitions and his promise. I think everyone knows about that at this point. But what about his fear? What does a man like Zoro have to possibly be afraid of? Well, it's his strength. Specifically, it's the fear of not being strong enough. I actually get somewhat peeved seeing the really basic way people chalk Zoro up, which is strength equals good swordsman, and good swordsman equals master swordsman, which means he can achieve his goal with Kuina. But what about the strength part there? There is so much more that goes into the strength aspect of his character. If you've noticed anything about Zoro, you'll notice he's training all the time, constantly lifting weights, swinging swords, and sweating like a whore in church. And this is pretty no duh. Even non-One Piece fans watchers know this is Zoro's whole deal. When he isn't training, he's sleeping, and when he isn't sleeping, he's picking on that one guy he totally hates. It's all good and fine when you first see it, and it makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't he tone those big bulging muscles to get stronger? But there's a noticeable pattern with him, and it becomes progressively more concerning the further you get into the series. This man never rests. Not when it comes to training, anyways. After Little Garden, even after nearly cutting his own feet off, he stitches himself up and pushes himself to go ice swimming. How he didn't get an infection from that, I do not know. After Alabasta, he sits out in the desert with rocks on either arm, bandaged up and still terribly injured from the fight with Mr. One. After Thriller Bark, even with the whopping life-threatening damage he took, he still won't sit still to let himself rest and keeps pushing himself to train. There's a particular moment in Punk Hazard as well, of even Sanji saying that Zoro is so hard on himself, and I'll get to that. The pattern you notice here is, the only time Zoro pushes himself to insane degrees like this is when he immensely struggled with the fight beforehand. And again, I am not debating his strength here, I'm just saying, objectively and from a narrative point of view, he had a pretty hard time with the fights and scenarios I just mentioned. This seems to be something that stemmed from his childhood. When Kuina passed, Zoro spent every waking moment aggressively training. Whether it was to try and ignore his grief or push his motivation to be the best for the both of them, either one is a good pick. It's probably a bit of both. But overall, there is a fear within Zoro's training. This man does not have a want to be stronger, but in his own mind, he needs to be stronger. It's a complete necessity, and he doesn't accept it as anything else. But with the need to be stronger comes the worry of what if I'm not strong enough, and that's exactly where this fear comes from. No one questions Zoro's strength within the series. Everyone has accepted him as the pirate hunting demon he is. But when it comes to Zoro, everything screams that he needs to be better. And while this has a lot to do with being a master swordsman, it's mainly to do with Kuina and especially with his crew. Zoro is, without a doubt, the protector of the Straw Hats. Whether he officially has that right role or not, it doesn't matter, because it's clear in Zoro's mind that that's what he is. And this all has to do with his backstory. It's pretty amazing really, because with how simple of a backstory it is, it tells us everything we need to know about Zoro. This is why I personally don't think we need a bigger backstory for him, considering we have everything we need right here. I know it's a meme within the community that Kuina fell down the stairs, and don't get me wrong, with how sudden it is unintentionally funny, but that's the main point of her death. It's sudden. It's sudden, it's cruel, and most of all, it was out of anyone's control. As far as we know at least. If you've noticed something about Zoro, he's pretty cynical. His outlook on life isn't the happiest one. He admits he's never prayed to a god, and not only that, he says even if there were a god, he still wouldn't pray to it. And why should he? Why should he pray to something that so cruelly and quickly took his best friend from him? Zoro's first experience with death and grief changed his life forever, and it taught him the cruelty of the world in which he lives. From there, an obsession was born. An obsession with control. It can be debated whether or not Zoro sees Kuina's death as his own fault, and maybe he does. After all, she wouldn't have gone to collect Wado and slipped down the stairs had he not challenged her to a real sword fight. But it honestly doesn't really matter either way, because what matters is how he views his own strength and himself after that. From then on, Zoro does everything in his power to keep control and to stop preventable situations. With strength comes control, and with control comes protection. He doesn't want to lose anyone the way he lost Kuina ever again, especially not anyone he cares about. There is such an obvious idea in his mind that being strong means he can prevent anything bad from happening to his crew, and with that comes the anxiety of not being there when he needs to be. This is incredibly prominent on the train scene in Water 7, where Zoro tells Sanji to wait for them due to the fact that CP9 is dangerous. He previously fought CP9 prior to this moment and got his ass beat. Hell, Luffy got his ass beat. Zoro even tells Luffy to make Sanji wait, and this is one of the first times we see Zoro actively going against Luffy's decision, until being talked into why Luffy made the decision of allowing Sanji to rampage on the train. Zoro isn't telling Sanji to wait for them because he believes Sanji to be weak. There's plenty of times Zoro has acknowledged Sanji's strength and capability. He's just genuinely afraid of what's going to happen to one of his crew members if he's not there to help, especially with an enemy he acknowledges as extremely dangerous. Zoro does actually care about everyone on his crew. He sees them as his own family, the way the rest of them do. So the thought of leaving his family in the midst of danger is anxiety-inducing for him. I know this might sound weird for some, since these moments aren't always picked up on, but Oda is a master at show don't tell. He's not going to have Zoro look into the camera and say, "I am scared I'm not strong enough," because that's not what good writers do. Instead, he shows it to us through Zoro's actions and emotions. There's something I have noticed about Zoro especially, and this is the fact that Zoro doesn't cry. It could just be that things don't get to him like the regular person. He's not exactly the over-emotional type, but he's always had a good head on his shoulders and grounds himself in the reality before indulging in the fantasy. But then I realized there are only 3 times Zoro has cried in this entire series. When Kuina died, when he lost to Kuina as a child, and when he lost to Mihawk at the Baratier. Kuina's death is a given, and I honestly think this broke him. I would not be surprised if he made a vow to never cry again or something, since he's such a man like that. For his battle against Kuina, it was the frustration of losing. She even taunted him about not being strong enough throughout the fight, and that's yet another indication of Zoro's obsession with strength. But for Mihawk, it was the clear gap in strength he'd never faced before. It was the belief of letting Kuina down, of not being enough for Luffy and the crew, and the realization that he just wasn't strong enough. On the surface, he kind of looks like a sore loser for it, but this moment made everything he is crumble down into the reality of what he wasn't. And what he wasn't was strong enough. Not for Kuina, not for Luffy and the crew, and especially not for himself. It's pretty heartbreaking to consider, and I wouldn't be surprised that that's the reason for this sudden and immediate tone shift from this belly-laughing goofy idiot to this more stone-faced goofy idiot. We also get a fantastic insight on Zoro's anxieties with Kuma. Zoro faced his toughest challenge since Mihawk with Kuma. Kuma at the time was unbeatable. He was a major threat that both Zoro and Sanji couldn't take down. Zoro sure tries his damnedest to defeat him, but nothing works, and eventually the bomb is set off. Here we see it all come back around. Kuma wants Luffy's head, and Zoro offers his own head in place of Luffy's. But that's not the most interesting part here. The most interesting part is how he treats Sanji. I need everyone to realize at this moment, Zoro 100% thought he was going to die. There was no negotiation of the dreaded pain bubble yet. It was a complete acceptance of his death and his life for his captain. And then Sanji comes into the mix. Sanji heard it all, knew completely that this was about Zoro's life, and offers his head for both Zoro and Luffy. This moment is not about strength, that comes afterwards. This moment is about the self-sacrificing nature of both of these characters. And the most interesting part of all of this is that Zoro wasn't having it. He used the last of his power to take Sanji out, to knock him down and render him unconscious. In Zoro's mind, this is non-negotiable, and that's why Sanji was so mad and so desperate when it happened. Zoro is refusing to let anyone on the crew die, to let anyone spare their life for his own. He doesn't want sacrifice in his name, because that's his job. This whole moment isn't Zoro thinking Sanji is weaker than him by any means, because again, there was no negotiation prior to this. This was a complete offering of life. This shows Zoro's need for protection, his stubbornness to do all he can for the crew, and to be in complete control of the situation. Afterwards, Kuma offers the option of the pain bubble, and this is where we see Zoro's strength come into play. And once he's been put through a fate worse than death, we get the iconic line. Nothing happened. He doesn't want to burden his captain, his crew, his family over such a sacrifice. He should be strong enough to handle this without making a commotion, without needing the help. And Sanji ultimately respects that, considering they're both the self-sacrificing type. But Kuma consistently sticks in the back of Zoro's mind, and we get a moment of Zoro genuinely experiencing PTSD upon seeing Kuma again. Kuma scares the shit out of Zoro because he isn't strong enough to handle him, and due to that, he loses complete control of the situation. He loses the ability to protect. Kuma even comes back around after the time skip when Zoro hears Luffy lost a fight in Punk Hazard. He acknowledges Luffy for being his captain, for being a man stronger than him, and hearing of his loss freaks him the fuck out. He yells at Luffy to get a grip, to which Sanji responds he's so tough on himself, because Sanji can see Zoro's trying to tell himself to calm down.
Oi, Luffy!
Zoro!
しっかりしやがれ！これからだぞ、新世界は！厳しいな、自分に。
Zoro doubted himself at this point, doubted his own strength and his own faith in Luffy, and both Luffy and Sanji acknowledged that. The only other time we've seen Zoro doubt Luffy and his strength and be scared for Luffy is in Alabasta, when Luffy was left behind to fight Crocodile, and Sanji noticed it and called him out on it. And just like all the other times Zoro has faced moments of doubt and anxiety, he is once again weightlifting to try and take his mind off it. In a way, Zoro seems to find it unforgivable to have himself doubt Luffy, which is why this Punk Hazard scene was so good. And this moment is definitely the nail in the coffin for where we can physically see Zoro's anxiety of strength. When Zoro pushes and pushes and pushes himself after a hard fight, it's not this mindless gym bro workout. This is punishment that he's putting onto himself. In his head, he can train through the pain, and if it hurts, so be it. He deserves that pain, because he should be stronger. It honestly hurts to see, especially after the Kuma fight. That's why any talk of his macho manliness and how cool he is with his weightlifting always leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Because in the end, his belief of manliness and strength all tie in with Kuina and his crew. And if he doesn't meet his own expectations, he needs to punish himself for it. There's also a shock in Wano upon the promise he made with Sanji, especially the way he immediately remembered that promise upon waking up and seeing Sanji again. If you know, you know. If this so-called promise ever has to go through, I believe this will put Zoro in an incredibly terrifying and anxiety-inducing position. But I might save that for another time, since that's an entire what-if scenario that is completely self-indulgent. Either way, I believe any conflict that will happen in the future with Zoro will rest on the near impossible reach of his dream, the complications of his protection, and his anxiety of strength. We're surely due for a Zoro conundrum any arc now, and this new promise in Wano seems to be readying to throw the oil into the fire. So I think exciting yet painful times are ahead for Zoro, and I cannot wait to see it happen. Zoro really is a fun and interesting character to me, just like all the Straw Hats are, but like many, he holds a special place in my heart. I really wanted to do him justice, since as much of a meathead as he is, there is definitely a lot more to him. As Sanji said during Punk Hazard, Zoro is actually a big softie at heart, and his love for his crew being a driving force for his ambitions is genuinely very endearing and heartwarming. He's a man scary of face, juicy of tits, and big of heart. And I cannot wait for him to be explored more. And thanks for watching. There are so many Zoro videos out there, so I hope that this one helped to throw something new into the mix. I said it before, but I will say it again. This is in no way a power scaling video, and everything I've said is with nothing but love. If there's anything you guys would like to see me cover, One Piece or otherwise, please let me know. And I'll see you all in whatever I make next. See ya!